ranking all of Disney's animated wedding dresses. Even though people joke about Disney constantly marrying off their female characters, it's actually not as common a trope as you might think, with only half of their princesses actually walking down the aisle. However, because of the pervasiveness of these comments, the company has made a conscious effort to focus less on romance in recent years, making happily ever afters a rare occurrence. As someone who's currently trying to figure out what to wear to their own wedding, I've been in a bridal state of mind. And what better way to scratch that itch than by judging the outfits of some of my favorite fictional characters. In today's video, I'm going to be taking a look at 20 different Disney wedding dresses. Then I'll rank them. I'll be discussing what I did and didn't like about these looks, how they related to the story and the character, as well as the real-life bridal trends that influenced the outfit. But first, a few disclaimers. In order for someone to be included on this list, they need to actually be a character, meaning random people wearing a wedding dress in the background don't count. Also, the character has to be wearing the dress with the specific intent of getting married. Whether or not the wedding actually happens isn't important, but it can't be something that they just happen to be wearing. And because it has to be said, this is my opinion, and it's totally fine if you disagree, just don't be an asshole about it. Now let's get into it. Ariel. With The Little Mermaid kicking off the Disney Renaissance, Ariel is probably one of the company's most recognizable heroines. Although best remembered for her purple seashell bra and bright green tail, when she was first introduced, Ariel had the most expansive wardrobe of any Disney heroine to date, and her wedding dress set the standard for animated characters in the years that followed. When Ariel was created, Disney wanted 1980s audiences to identify with her, so they gave her personality and character design some contemporary quirks. The choice of red hair, for example, was inspired by teen sensation Molly Ringwald, who was often referred to as America's sweetheart. Pink was incredibly popular at the time, as evidenced in Steel Magnolias, Pretty in Pink, and Mystic Pizza, so the color was incorporated into Ariel's wardrobe alongside a handful of other fashion trends to make her seem hip. Although the film doesn't state its exact time period, multiple signs, including Ariel's wedding dress, point to it taking place sometime during the 19th century. Her giant puffed sleeves are known as the leg of mutton style, which were first popularized during the Elizabethan era, where they grew to gargantuan size. The trend made an eventual comeback centuries later during the Victorian era, with puffed sleeves being a staple of both the 1830s and the 1890s, although Ariel's dress is more reminiscent of the latter. Other historical references include Ariel's split skirt, a style that was popular during the 15th and 16th centuries, being worn by royals like Mary Tudor and Catherine de' Medici. The 1980s was a period of economic prosperity, resulting in a good deal of conspicuous consumption, something that was reflected in the era's clothing, which became gaudy and bold. With bridal wear similarly gravitating towards the ostentatious, 19th century trends returned in full force, including leg of mutton sleeves. Peplum-style bodices also returned in the 80s, having been popularized during the bustle craze of the late 1800s. Because of these parallels, even though Ariel's dress initially reads as Victorian, there were still enough similarities to contemporary bridal attire that she didn't look frumpy to 1980s audiences. Around the time the film entered production, the UK had a royal wedding, and not the one you're thinking of. In 1986, Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson married, with the bride wearing a diamond tiara that had been recently gifted to her by the Queen. Known as the York tiara, it had a distinctive pointed shape that I can't help but compare to Ariel's. Sure, Ariel's tiara is solid gold, but with Fergie also having red hair, it feels like it had to be Disney's point of reference. Even Ariel's pearl drop earrings are deliciously 1980s, and at this point, I have to wonder which person on the animation team was tasked with looking through magazines all day to keep tabs on the latest fashion trends. The only thing I don't really love about Ariel's dress is the seafoam green piping, which was likely added to give the outfit some contrast, but I would have preferred if it'd been all white. Vanessa. While in his hypnotized state, Prince Eric is mere moments away from marrying Vanessa, Ursula's human alter ego. Throughout the film, her outfits are made to resemble Ariel's, but their subtle differences mirror how Vanessa is just a shallow imitation. Her wedding dress is no exception to the symbolism, having a similar pointed headpiece, puffed sleeves, and split skirt, but Ariel's, of course, looks better. The lack of volume, as well as the lifeless ruffles, make Vanessa's dress look cheap, and I think it's a good thing that Eric was brainwashed, or the sight of her might have made him turn around right then and there. Lottie. Ever since childhood, Lottie has been determined to marry a prince and become a princess, so when the opportunity finally arises, she doesn't hesitate, agreeing to marry Lawrence as Naveen shortly after meeting him, turning the Mardi Gras parade into her personal wedding reception. When dressed casually, Lottie's outfits are in the 1920s flapper style, featuring the same short skirts and drop waists. When she's in more of a princessy mood, she opts for volume, with big hair, big sleeves, and big skirts, looking every bit the Southern belle. Exclusively seen wearing pink, even her wedding dress is her signature color, highlighting her femininity, innocence, and flirtatiousness. With its rosettes and interchanging layers, the dress looks exactly like a cake, which is likely on purpose as it makes her match the parade float. The dress does have a certain charm, although that may just be because of the person wearing it, but overall, it feels pretty juvenile, and she definitely looks more like a kid playing dress-up than a young woman about to be married. Tiana. The only Disney princess to get married twice, Tiana's green and yellow ball gown is also her official look in merchandise. Made out of magic, the dress appears after she and Naveen finally marry, breaking the spell and turning them from frogs back into humans. Unlike the rest of Tiana's wardrobe, which is inspired by the film's 1920s setting, the wedding dress strays from historical accuracy, taking notes from more modern bridal trends. Like most of Disney's wedding dresses, there's an obvious 1980s influence, as evidenced by her bouffant veil. The fluffy style had previously been popular in the 1950s and 60s, but returned with a vengeance in the 80s due to the era's love of extravagance and drama. However, the strapless ball gown, combined with the asymmetric layers and opera-length gloves, are also reminiscent of bridal wear of the 2000s, once again catering to contemporary viewers. Tiny water droplets are used as stand-ins for typical wedding dress adornments like pearls and rhinestones. The dress is made to resemble a water lily, with the darker green layer being the leaves and the rest of the dress being the flower, even having literal petals. In early concept art, they toyed around with even more of this nature imagery by adding duckweed trim and Spanish moss fringe, but I'm glad they held back, since it starts to give her a sort of Mother Nature type of vibe, which Epic seemed to have taken notes from a few years later. Although the swamp inspirations are still a bit too on the nose for my taste, I respect their choice to give her an unconventional dress color, even if the main motivation behind it was to make her stand out in the Disney princess lineup. Considering how great Tiana looks at Lottie's party, I would have loved for her wedding dress to have a similar blue color palette, but that probably wouldn't have been froggy enough for toys. Tiana. With women's hair getting shorter during the Jazz Age, wedding veils took on a different silhouette to accommodate the trend, and incorporated popular headwear from the time period like cloche hats and bandeau headbands. Tiana's veil is the popular cathedral style, touching the floor and trailing behind her as she walks. It's elegant and luxe, perfect for a princess. The silhouette of the dress is a little too long and a little too tight to be accurate to the 1920s, being more reminiscent of evening wear of the 1930s. But it's possible that that was the point in order to highlight how much Tiana's circumstances have changed since the beginning of the film. Based on some early concept art, it looks like they did toy around with the idea of a more flapper-esque dress, but the final figure-hugging design was likely chosen to appeal to audiences. I think the flower works better on this dress than the other, and I really like how the crisscross green piping solidifies the nature imagery, sort of resembling vines. Most of Disney's princesses wear poofy wedding dresses, so I love how unique this is in comparison. I just wish we'd been able to see more of it. And this doesn't really have anything to do with the video, but I also think they should have had Naveen wear a tuxedo instead of a dress uniform. I get that it's to make him look more princely, but so many of Disney's love interests have worn military attire while getting married that it's kind of overdone at this point. And come on, he's a modern guy, give him a modern look. Jasmine. The third and final installment of Disney's animated Aladdin franchise, the King of Thieves finally sees the happy couple tie the knot, though their walk down the aisle doesn't go uninterrupted.
That was for ruining my wedding.
Like most of the clothing in the series, there's an Orientalist approach to Jasmine's wedding attire, mashing multiple cultures together to create a stereotypically exotic look that matches the film's pseudo-Arabian aesthetic. India is the biggest influence on Jasmine's wardrobe, with the character's iconic two-piece sets resembling a choli, a cropped blouse, and shalwar, a baggy trouser. Traditionally, the two garments wouldn't be paired together, with the shalwar being worn with a long tunic, while the choli would be worn with a sari or a lehenga and dupatta. Because of the amount of skin showing, these looks wind up being reminiscent of the badla, a traditional Egyptian dance costume, which has made appearances in media for decades as a shorthand for any woman of Arab descent, often sexualizing them in the process. While the production's biases likely influenced the skimpy direction of Jasmine's outfits, I also think they were trying to pay homage to the costumes seen in old Hollywood historical epics, which forwent historical accuracy in favor of aesthetics and glamour. Aladdin, Jafar, and the Sultan often wear kaftans, which were staples of the Ottoman Empire, but the silhouette is exaggerated in the film with the addition of pagoda shoulders, named after the building in Asia that it gets its shape from. The men wear these outfits for more formal occasions, so it makes sense for Jasmine to wear her own version for the wedding, and the fact that she and Aladdin match is pretty cute. They're like one big happy family. If you ignore the gold details and the dramatic shoulders, Jasmine's dress is actually pretty simple, cutting close to her body and being devoid of excess ruffles. Besides being a good fit for her personal style, this sleek look was also reflective of mid-90s bridal trends, which were slowly moving away from the aesthetics of the prior decade in favor of minimalism. Although the dress works in universe, probably ending up on the cover of Agrabah Weekly, I don't think it would translate well to real life, coming across as costumey. But I do like the flowers in Jasmine's hair, which are a nice change of pace from the usual crown-veil combo. Rapunzel. Released in 2012, Tangled Ever After was put into production because of popular demand, with fans of the original film begging to see Rapunzel and Flynn get married. As one of Disney's first computer-animated wedding dresses, Rapunzel's outfit was able to have a bit more detail than the ones that came before it, but unfortunately, it seems like the veil hogged all the attention, leaving everything else about the look wanting. An incredibly long cathedral style, the veil is embroidered with small suns, the symbol of the kingdom, which I actually think translates well, looking dainty and sweet. The problem is the dress, which is basically identical to what Rapunzel wore at the end of the first movie, just in white instead of purple. I get it, this project had a short turnaround time, so it was probably easier to just recolor something they already designed, but that laziness certainly shows in the final product. Now I'll be honest, I don't like Rapunzel's dresses to begin with. There's just nothing about them that's very interesting, but I can at least ignore that in the context of the film. After all, she's been locked in a tower for 18 years. I don't expect her to know the latest fashion trends, but she still deserves something special for her wedding day. She's a princess, for Christ's sakes. I'm not saying they had to go the poofy route, but something a little more exciting would have been nice. Giselle. The only outfit on this list to have a real-life counterpart, Giselle's wedding dress includes subtle references to Disney's previous animated princesses, and like the film as a whole, it both parodies and honors the history of the company. Unlike the other characters on this list, whose outfits were created by the animators, the film's costume designer, Mona May, was responsible for the look. May wanted to lean into the stereotypical princess image, like the tiny waists, big sleeves, and poofy skirts, which meant playing around with the proportions of Giselle's outfit. As a result, everything is exaggerated, even her hair, creating a more ridiculous visual once she makes it to the real world. Like all of her clothing, the wedding dress is made by Giselle with the help of her furry animal friends. With its giant sleeves, there are similarities to Ariel's dress in The Little Mermaid, and the choice in reference makes a lot of sense when you consider how influential she was on the Disney princess formula. Cinderella is also hinted at, with Giselle arriving in a similar carriage, the animals putting finishing touches on her dress, and the birds helping her with her crown. Although Enchanted came out before The Princess and the Frog, there are a handful of parallels between Tiana's dress and Giselle's, like the sparkles, asymmetric ruffles, and flower details, leading me to think that the two productions pulled inspiration from the same bridal trends. Giselle is one of the only characters on this list that doesn't wear a veil, which I actually think is fitting for her bubbly personality, since it feels like it would just get in her way, and her gloves are probably cut off at the wrists for the same reason. Even though it works brilliantly in the context of the film, highlighting Giselle's cartoonish personality as well as her hope for a fairy tale romance, the dress is way too flamboyant for my tastes. Now, I'm not saying that I would change anything about it, because it's the perfect outfit for her to roam the streets of New York in. I just wouldn't wear it myself. Now, if it was more similar to the pink dress that she was introduced in, then it'd be right up my alley. Nancy. Nancy is essentially Giselle's foil, being introduced as a down-to-earth modern woman, but deep down wanting a romance that will sweep her off her feet. With Edward, she finally gets her happily ever after, and for their wedding, she fully dresses the part of a Disney princess. In the real world, Nancy is a fashion designer, so we can assume that the dress she wears is her own creation, and I think I can even guess where she got the inspiration for it from. The gown is a dead ringer for what Princess Diana wore to her wedding in 1981, down to the ruffles on the neckline, the cascading veil, and the simple skirt. But I love the switch to off-shoulder sleeves, which makes it feel just a touch more modern and sexy. Although her and Giselle's wedding dresses share some similarities, like their general poofiness, Nancy's is less over the top, similar to how her personality isn't as loud as Giselle's. Giselle's dress is also so 1980s it hurts, while Nancy's dress is a bit more timeless, as evidenced by the fact that similar vintage dresses have become all the rage in recent years. There's not much else to say about this look, other than I really like it. Calhoun. There are parts of this outfit that I really like, and others that I don't. To start, I think the headpiece is brilliant, with the crystals having a pixelated effect that pay homage to their world, while the overall shape is similar to a comms headset. With its mesh panel, waist-cinching belt, trumpet skirt, and bateau neckline, Calhoun's dress is distinctly 2010s, but it does make sense for the character since she's from a newer video game. Although the dress doesn't really do it for me, I do like the sheer ruffles on the skirt, which sort of look like broken glass. I also love their decision to go with a sleeveless dress, since Calhoun's muscular physique isn't one we often see in the Disney universe, and if I were her, I'd be showing them off all the time. Cinderella. A product of the post-war era, Cinderella's rags to riches storyline was one that audiences not only found aspirational, but relatable, having made sacrifices in the 1940s that they hoped they would be rewarded for in the 1950s. During a time of increased nationalism, Cinderella was made to look like the all-American girl, hence the blonde hair and blue eyes. Her everyday attire was plain and simple, reminding people of what they wore while doing their own housework. But the character's formal attire was more luxurious, looking like they'd come straight out of a magazine. Obviously, her most memorable outfit in the movie is her ball gown, but her wedding dress is nothing to scoff at. Unlike her other outfits, which incorporate elements of the past to create a fantastical aesthetic, her wedding ensemble is all 1950s. On her head is a Juliet cap veil, which was popular from the 1930s well into the 1950s, being worn by the likes of Grace Kelly, Jackie Kennedy, and Debbie Reynolds. The dress itself takes notes from Christian Dior's new look, which sought to bring femininity and frivolity back into the world of fashion after the restrictions of World War II, resulting in a silhouette that emphasized the female form and garments that used as much fabric as possible. Although we tend to associate choker necklaces with the grungy 1990s, they've been around for centuries, being worn by an array of royals like Marie Antoinette, Queen Victoria, and Empress Alexandra. The style returned in the 1940s, being spotted on dozens of starlets like Elizabeth Taylor, Audrey Hepburn, and Brigitte Bardot, with the press humorously referring to it as the dog collar. While Cinderella's ribbon-style choker was fairly common at the time, I don't think the jet black color plays well with the rest of the look, so I was grateful for the change to white in the sequel. But if I'm being honest, I would have preferred a string of pearls, which would have been more timeless. Cinderella. With the film essentially serving as a do-over of the original, we see Cinderella get a brand new wedding dress after her first is destroyed. Created by the fairy godmother, there's a flashiness to it that I associate with 21st century Disney princess dresses, but for a direct-to-video sequel, it's actually pretty nice, especially compared to some of the more heinous looks they'd given her in recent years. While Cinderella's outfits in the first movie focused on balancing relatability and fantasy by combining contemporary trends with historical ones, her new wedding dress is more story-driven, referencing her past by combining 3 of her most iconic outfits into one. The fitted sleeves and choker are taken from her first wedding dress. The bows at the bottom serve as a reminder of her mother's pink gown, and the shimmering silver color is an ode to her ball gown. By putting all of these motifs together, the dress feels uniquely Cinderella, but not in a tacky way. Katrina. I wasn't even sure if I should include this, since you only see it for a few seconds, but a wedding is a wedding, I guess. If you're unfamiliar with the adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, it came out during Disney's wartime era, the time period when the company was almost exclusively releasing anthology films because of budget constraints. The film's second segment is based on the 1820 short story, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which follows charismatic schoolteacher Ichabod Crane and his experience with the mysterious Headless Horseman. Katrina Van Tassel is the toast of the town, being as wealthy as she is beautiful. Although she's unofficially engaged to Brom Bones, Ichabod takes interest in her, but not for the purest reasons, and the two men begin competing for her affection, with Ichabod's charm winning out against Brom's physicality. In contrast to her sweet appearance, Katrina is actually rather devious, bossing the men around, flirting with Ichabod to make Brom jealous, and laughing at others' misfortune. Although she entertains Ichabod's flirtation, Brom is the one she truly loves, and after Ichabod disappears, the couple quickly marry. Released only 1 year before Cinderella, the two projects wound up sharing the same animation department, and as a result, there's a good deal of overlap visually. Besides the physical resemblance between Katrina and Cinderella, her clothing is also similar, with peplums, bustles, and chokers. Having worn pink for the majority of the film, Katrina switches to blue for the wedding, making her match Brom. Like Cinderella, she also wears the popular cap veil, bringing in a pop of white that ties into her bouquet of lilies. Maybe I'm biased because of its short screen time, but the look just doesn't feel very bridal. Shouldn't the richest girl in town have the best dress? Anita. In another blink and you'll miss it moment, Roger and Anita have a quiet marriage ceremony that I wouldn't blame you for forgetting. Anita's outfit is pretty difficult to make out, but considering Roger is in a different suit and she has on a different hat, I'm confident it's a different outfit from the previous scene. Although the film is set in 1958, the entire wedding looks like it's from the 1940s, which saw the most casual ceremonies of the entire century because of the hardships and restrictions of World War II. In the 40s, women opted to wear simple suits for their ceremonies, but by the late 1950s, wedding dresses had returned to their feminine and frilly glory. Which one do you think Anita's outfit resembles? Maybe they wanted to save all of the fashionable moments in the movie for Cruella, but they could have thrown Anita a bone and given her a white dress. For once, the live-action movie does it better. Ellie. Based on Carl's age, he and Ellie likely got married sometime in the 1940s or 50s. It's possible that because she was such a tomboy growing up that she simply didn't have much interest in fashion, but since she winds up wearing some pretty cute outfits later on in the movie, I don't know why her wedding dress was such a dud. It kinda works if you imagine that she was always planning to go right into construction worker mode after they said I do, but considering Ellie's creativity and high energy, I think they could have had a lot more fun. Frou Frou. The entire crime boss subplot in Zootopia is inspired by the 1972 film The Godfather, with Mr. Big being a parody of Vito Corleone, while Frou Frou is Connie. Besides the dialogue being pulled directly from The Godfather, so is Frou Frou's wedding ensemble, which has the same scalloped lace and flower headpiece as Connie's. Frou Frou deviates from the formula a bit with a fun hairstyle, sporting the bouffant popularized in the 1960s, which has since become associated with Italian Americans thanks to the Jersey Shore. Even though it's meant to be a joke, the hairdo manages to come across as bridal, and I like that it feels true to her. Although The Godfather is set in 1945, the dress reads as more 1950s to me personally because of the full skirt, high collar, and chunky lace. Funnily, I actually think Frou Frou looks better in it than Connie does, but overall, the dress isn't very memorable, especially for a character with so much personality. Frou Frou actually tries on a different wedding dress in the Zootopia Plus series, and I actually prefer it to this one. Sure, you lose the Godfather reference, but it's a lot more interesting. However, because she doesn't actually plan to wear it to the wedding, it won't be included in this ranking. Maid Marian. Marian's wedding outfit is near identical to what she'd been wearing the entire film, just in white. Now, during the Middle Ages, there wasn't an established wedding dress color like there is today, so if you were a peasant, you would simply wear the best dress you owned. But if you were wealthier, you'd commission a new dress to be made just for the occasion. If the bride's family was especially well off, the dress would be made of velvet or silk instead of wool or linen, and it would also be adorned with embroidery and jewels. Marian's outfits incorporate kirtles and surcoats, which were standard attire for women during the time period, being worn with a tie around the waist, just as Marian does. Although it resembles a veil, Marian's head covering is actually a wimple, a large piece of cloth that married Christian women used to cover their hair. Admittedly, Marian was wearing a wimple before she was even married, but I think it's a brilliant choice for her wedding outfit, as it's vaguely familiar to contemporary audiences while still being historically accurate. The wimple was actually pretty tame when it came to medieval head coverings, and in early development, they considered giving Marian some of these more eccentric styles, which I wouldn't have complained about. Similar to how the 1980s saw a Victorian revival, fashions of the 1970s took inspiration from the Middle Ages, with bridal wear including long sleeves, flower accents, high collars, and wacky headwear. As a result, even though Marian's wedding dress looks medieval at first glance, it wasn't actually too far off from what other brides were wearing in 1973, as evidenced by the royal wedding of Princess Anne that same year. Although I like the historical elements, it does feel a bit old-fashioned, to the point that it reminds me of the horrible wedding dress in The Proposal. Mulan. Shockingly, arranged marriages aren't a very common trope in the Disney universe, with Mulan being one of the only female characters who even comes close to marrying a man that she doesn't love. Believing that Shang has been killed, Mulan offers her hand in marriage to the Prince of Qigong in place of the Emperor's 3 daughters, hoping to assure an alliance that will save her kingdom.
This is her? She's so old.
The film is often assumed to take place in China during the Wei dynasty, which was sometime between 386 and 535 AD. More formal than her typical clothing, the dress is reminiscent of the outfit she wore when visiting the matchmaker in the first film, but with a less juvenile color palette. In China, white is symbolic of death, so the color was strictly avoided for weddings, and red became the standard instead, representing good fortune and joy. The outfit is inspired by the ruxian, a form of traditional Chinese attire that included a jacket, a skirt, and a sash tied at the waist. Mulan and the rest of the female characters regularly wear some iteration of a ruxian, but this one is the most intricate by far, as evidenced by the gold embroidery and accessories. On her head, Mulan is wearing a fengguan, also known as a phoenix crown, which is symbolic of her new status as a royal. While traditionally worn by noble women, the fengguan was later incorporated into Chinese wedding attire as they were considered auspicious. Mulan's jade accessories have similarly lucky connotations, and with all of these elements combined, we can infer that the king really wanted this marriage to work out. When it comes to cultural outfits, Disney can often miss the mark, even veering into stereotype territory, but I think this look was able to succeed where most fail. Sure, Mulan was totally miserable, but that doesn't make me like it any less. Mulan. At her actual wedding to Shang, Mulan wears a ruxian that is even more similar to her matchmaker outfit, but it somehow manages to be way less interesting. When she originally wears the outfit, it's in the hopes of making a good impression, and the additional styling of the shawl, jewelry, updo, and makeup all make her look like the perfect bride. Obviously, Mulan isn't that type of girl, preferring function over fashion, but I think they wound up making her look too plain at the wedding. Hell, even Shang's outfit is more impressive. I know the flower crown is supposed to highlight her free spirit, but I think it just looks childish. Why not give her an updo with the comb from the first movie? And although a veil would read as too Western, they could have given her a sheer robe to sort of fake the look. Pepa. Disney's latest wedding dress appears during the We Don't Talk About Bruno flashback in Encanto. Worn by Pepa, it's just a white version of the outfit she wears the rest of the film, which, as you can probably guess, I'm not too happy about. Now, I do like the idea of her dyeing the dress and repurposing it, as it highlights how she hasn't moved on from the events of that day, but that doesn't make it any less disappointing aesthetically. All of the female characters wear dresses inspired by traditional Colombian clothing, hence the ruffles, while the colors and embroidery relate to their respective powers and personalities. In its normal state, Pepa's dress is a perfect fit for her, looking like a literal ray of sunshine, but the wedding dress is bland in comparison. At the very least, they should have made the trim and embroidery yellow. Now that we've covered all 20 Disney wedding dresses, let's get to the rankings, starting from the worst and ending with the best. Now this is going to be heavily biased, so don't take it too seriously if your favorite isn't mine. Anita. I'm not going to lie to you, the main reason this is getting the lowest ranking is because it has no screen time, but what little I can see, I'm not impressed by. Ellie. This woman dreams of moving to South America and paints murals all over her house. You're trying to tell me that her wedding dress would be this boring? I don't think so. Katrina. Again, this is only ranked so low because I can't really see it, but also, I hate how mismatched the dress and the veil are. Plus, it reminds me of the Ugly Stepsisters. Vanessa. She's meant to look like an Ariel knockoff, and they certainly succeeded. At least Ursula destroyed it, so no one ever has to see it again. Pepa. If there was ever an outfit that screamed, "We don't want to pay our animators more," it's this one. Like Disney really said, just make it white and called it a day. Mulan. This probably would have been higher on the list if it wasn't such a blatant ripoff of her matchmaker outfit, but as it stands, Mulan got outdressed by her husband. Rapunzel. I know this is going to upset the Tangled fans, but the only good thing about this outfit is the veil, which is so nice it actually makes the dress look even worse. Frou-frou. While I think the Godfather reference is fun, that's all the dress really has going for it. Frou-frou deserved better. Calhoun. From far away, this look is nothing to write home about, but up close, it actually has some cool details, and I don't even mind that she wears it for 2 different weddings. Lottie. The weakest of all her outfits, the pink wedding dress is definitely a bit of an eyesore, but I'll applaud her for taking risks. Jasmine. Is this a terrible representation of Arab culture? Yes. Does she look good? Also yes. But let's be real, Jasmine looks great in everything. Maid Marian. Even if it feels a bit outdated, I have to give it props for being so different from Disney's usual wedding dresses, and it also gets points for the wimple. Giselle. As I said, I love what this dress stands for, but visually, it's just not my cup of tea, but maybe that's because I couldn't pull off that many ruffles. Tiana. Now don't get me wrong, this is one of the most creative dresses on this list, but that might actually be the problem, because it doesn't really read as bridal. Nancy. Sure, it's a Princess Diana dupe, but a classic is a classic for a reason. I might not wear it to my wedding, but I'd wear it to something. Ariel. If I was getting married when the movie first came out, I would have done anything to wear Ariel's dress. But it's not 1989 anymore, and thank God for that, because I think those sleeves would have eaten me alive. Cinderella. Referencing yourself is the ultimate power move, and the fact that they were able to combine so many motifs while still being understated is a feat. It's a little too princessy for me to put it any higher, but still a great effort, especially for a sequel. Mulan. The amount of research that went into this dress tells me it was a labor of love, and that alone is reason enough for it to be in my top 3. The fact that Mulan looks amazing is just a bonus. Cinderella. This dress is a clear product of its time, and I love it for that. Will some people call it plain? Sure, but I call it chic. Tiana. This dress does it all. It looks great, it represents the character, and it's historically accurate-ish. If I had to pick one of these dresses to wear at my wedding, I'd happily choose this one. As I mentioned, Disney is pretty anti-marriage right now, but I hope we'll see more brides someday. Which Disney character has your favorite wedding dress? And would you be interested in another wedding dress ranking, but for rom-coms? I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye!